The sickening crunch of the heavy-duty lawnmower blade tearing through the meticulously planted heirloom tomatoes was the sound that woke the entire street. It wasn't the gardener, it was Mr. Sterling, the self-appointed, iron-fisted president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, HOA. He stood on the driveway, a venomous smile painted on his face, directing a hired crew of 3 men in neon vests. Brenda's urban sanctuary, her tiny, vibrant front yard garden, the one that made her house on Willowbrook Lane feel like home, was being brutally erased. "I gave you exactly 24 hours, Mrs. Hayes," Sterling's voice boomed, sharp and cold like a Canadian winter's wind. "Your mess violates Section 4, subsection B, of the Community Covenants. No vegetable patch on the front curb appeal side. It's unsightly. It depreciates the property value for everyone." Brenda, a woman whose small frame hid a spine of steel, stood frozen on her porch, clutching a mug that suddenly felt too hot. Tears welled, not just of sadness, but of pure, white-hot fury. This wasn't just a garden, it was her financial lifeline, the source of her food, her tiny side hustle selling fresh herbs at the local market, and, most importantly, her mental wellness retreat after a brutal year. The crew chief paused, his face showing a flicker of shame, but Sterling just waved his hand, a gesture of absolute corporate snobbery. Chop. Tear. Shred. The smell of earth and crushed mint filled the air, a scent of defeat. "You have no right," Brenda finally whispered, her voice shaking. Sterling only laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound that echoed down the quiet, manicured street. "Oh, but I do. It's all perfectly legal," he sneered, tapping a stack of official-looking papers against his palm. "And your HOA dues are 2 weeks late, which, as you know, carries a significant penalty. Consider this cleanup fee added to your delinquent account. It's the cost of being a proper homeowner in our exclusive development." Just as the men were about to rip out the last, tallest part of the garden, a beautiful trellis covered in climbing beans, Brenda's eyes narrowed. That moment, right then, she wasn't just a bullied single mom, she was an underdog who had just been pushed too far. She took a deep breath, and a truly shocking sound ripped from her throat. A sound that made the gardeners stop, made Sterling's smile vanish, and made every neighbor secretly watching from behind their pristine window blinds drop their coffee mug. It was the sound of a woman who had just realized she had nothing left to lose. But what did she actually say or do in that terrifying moment? We have to rewind to understand the full gravity of that destruction. Brenda had moved into Maple Ridge 6 months earlier, pouring every penny of her life savings into the small house. The neighborhood was beautiful, but the HOA, run by Mr. Sterling, a retired, extremely wealthy executive whose favorite pastime was micromanaging others, was a different story. Brenda, a certified nutritionist, had a simple dream: to grow her own food. She knew the costs of fresh produce in Canada, and this was her answer to inflation and a way to gain some financial stability. She didn't plant a messy jungle, she created a masterpiece. A design-forward garden with neat cedar beds, a beautiful stone border, and a towering display of sunflowers in the back. The neighbors loved it. They'd stop to chat, asking for tips and even trading recipes. But Sterling didn't see beauty or community spirit, he saw nonconformity. His house, 2 doors down, was a shrine to beige and perfectly cut grass. He approached Brenda 3 weeks ago, not with a friendly hello, but with a stiff, formal letter tucked inside a thick, yellow envelope. The letter, filled with legalistic jargon and corporate arrogance, claimed her garden violated the rules. Sterling's personal grudge became clear the next day. He cornered her on the street, not even bothering to lower his voice. "We have an image to maintain here, Mrs. Hayes. People pay a premium to live in Maple Ridge. They don't want to look at a farm stand when they drive by. This isn't some low-rent area, it's a high-value investment." His comments reeked of racism and classism, a clear demonstration of him believing her presence, and her garden, devalued his world. Brenda tried to compromise. She offered to move the vegetable plants to the side yard, leaving only flowers in the front. Sterling scoffed. "The rule says no. I suggest you consult your legal counsel, but trust me, you can't fight the bylaws." He even filed a complaint about her garden gnome, calling it a tasteless aesthetic pollutant. The subtle tension became an open war. This was a prejudice showdown where a powerful man used his corporate authority, the HOA, to bully an underdog who was just trying to live a decent life and achieve food security. Brenda spent a desperate, sleepless week searching for an escape. She called lawyers, only to be quoted exorbitant legal fees that were far outside her budget. This HOA, designed to maintain property standards, was instead being used as Sterling's personal tool of oppression. She considered giving up, but every time she looked at the trellis, she thought of her son and the healthy meals this garden provided. She felt like the little guy fighting a multi-million-dollar corporation. Finally, a twist arrived. It was a seemingly small moment. Her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Petrova, a woman who rarely spoke, slipped a folded note into Brenda's mailbox. It wasn't advice or a simple word of encouragement. It was a single, cryptic phrase and a date: check the original Plat Map. September 12, 1982. Brenda felt a jolt of suspense. What did an old real estate document have to do with her peppers? She rushed to the city archives, battling confusing bureaucracy for hours until she found the heavy, dusty book. There, on the original, hand-drawn map of the Maple Ridge development, was a small, nearly forgotten line of text near her lot. It detailed a special provision, a forgotten legal loophole that Sterling, in his arrogant focus on the newer bylaws, had completely missed. A loophole that related to public space and community resources. She walked home that night, not with defeat, but with a secret, dangerous weapon. She didn't use it immediately. She decided to let Sterling's corporate snobbery run its course. She knew that the underdog comeback would only be truly satisfying after the prejudice showdown was complete. She let him destroy the garden, sacrificing her plants to prove a much larger point. And that brings us back to the present. The trellis, the last part of her garden, was about to fall. Sterling was gloating. And Brenda, armed with a hidden legal truth and a heart full of righteous anger, was ready. As the crew chief revved the engine, she pointed not at the men, but directly at Sterling. Her voice was no longer a whisper, it was clear, strong, and laced with deadly calm. "You like rules, Mr. Sterling? You like legal documents? Fine. I hope you're ready for the financial audit because, as of this morning, your power is gone. What exactly was on that original Plat Map, and how did a vegetable garden trigger a legal and financial downfall for the most powerful man in the neighborhood?" If you enjoy this kind of suspenseful storytelling and want to see the underdog get justice, please subscribe to Stories Mike right now, hit that bell for notifications, and drop your city below. Tell us what your HOA is like. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 2, detailing the shocking underdog comeback and the HOA's meltdown? The sound of the lawnmower cutting out was deafeningly quiet. Mr. Sterling's face, usually set in a mask of arrogant self-satisfaction, was now a portrait of confusion. The hired crew looked from Brenda to their boss, their hands hovering over the shredded goldenrod and mint. "My power is gone?" Sterling finally scoffed, recovering his composure. "You've been served 2 legal notices, Mrs. Hayes. You're delinquent on your HOA fees, and I just ordered the cleanup of your unauthorized structure. You, my dear woman, are facing a lien on your property and a hefty fine. I have the power. I have the bylaws." He even emphasized the high CPM, legalistic jargon like a proper villain. Brenda's fear was completely gone, replaced by the calm, unwavering focus of a fighter. "The bylaws you wrote, Mr. Sterling, are not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the original Plat Map, filed with the City of Ottawa on September 12, 1982. She pulled out a crumpled, but clearly stamped and sealed, copy of the map. The tension was a thick, electric blanket thrown over the street. Neighbors were now spilling onto their lawns, their curiosity overpowering their fear of Sterling. That old real estate junk? Sterling laughed, but the sound was shaky. The original development plans are superseded by the current community covenants. Normally, yes, Brenda agreed, walking toward the spot where her prized climbing beans once grew. But I think you, the great manager of our high-value investment, missed one little, crucial detail, a forgotten legal loophole that specifically protects a piece of this land. She pointed to a thin, dotted line that ran directly through the edge of her property and continued down the street. Next to the line was a tiny, faded note. Sterling snatched the paper, his eyes frantically scanning the minute print. The color drained from his face as he read the words, Community Allotment, permanently zoned for shared agricultural use. What? He croaked, disbelief twisting his features. Brenda gave him a cold, hard stare. That small strip of land, Mr. Sterling, the one you just destroyed my garden on, was designated as a community garden allotment during the original subdivision to gain a development permit from the city. It's a public easement. It can't be governed by your HOA rules because it's technically municipal property reserved for community resources. The shocking truth dropped like a stone in the silent neighborhood. Sterling hadn't just bullied a single mother, he had illegally authorized the destruction of public land. He had used his position of power, the very corporate snobbery she was fighting against, to commit an act of vandalism on government property. Brenda wasn't finished. The garden was my proof. Now, let's talk about your fine. Sterling, sputtering, tried to regain control. You're still 2 weeks late on your HOA dues, which now includes the $900 cleanup fee for that mess you called a garden. This was the ultimate high. Brenda pulled a single sheet of paper from her back pocket, a professionally printed letterhead from a very expensive downtown Toronto law firm. Yesterday, she announced, her voice ringing with authority, I paid my 2 weeks' dues and that ridiculous fine. But in return, I've filed 2 things. First, a cease and desist order to stop any further trespassing on the community allotment. And second. She paused, letting the suspense build, a class-action lawsuit against the entire Maple Ridge Homeowners Association board for negligence, abuse of power, and mismanagement of funds. The neighbors gasped. This was more than just a garden, this was a complete financial and legal exposé. Brenda pointed to the board members' houses. Mr. Sterling and his hand-picked board have been using our HOA funds, money paid for property maintenance and community development, to cover his personal legal fees and maintain an overly expensive landscaping contract with his brother's firm, as detailed in this financial audit I've included. She continued, the total cost of the illegal landscaping contracts over the past 5 years is nearly $1.5 million in our money. That's $1.5 million that should have been spent on things like the collapsed retaining wall in the back and the terrible property insurance policy you signed us up for, which is practically useless. Sterling was now pale, his face slick with sweat. He tried to speak, but only a desperate wheeze came out. His personal prejudice against Brenda's small garden had led him to overstep, completely exposing his own massive corporate-level financial fraud. The fine he was so eager to slap on her was a drop in the bucket compared to the huge financial penalty he was now facing. The police cruiser, with its red and blue lights flashing, silently rounded the corner of Willowbrook Lane. It stopped directly behind Mr. Sterling's expensive imported car. 2 officers stepped out, looking official. One officer addressed Sterling by name. Mr. Sterling, we have a warrant for your arrest, issued on a complaint regarding HOA fund misappropriation and destruction of public property. The Underdog comeback was complete. Brenda, the bullied woman, didn't just save her garden, she saved the entire community from a corrupt board, all because of an old map. As the officers led a defeated, silently raging Mr. Sterling away, Brenda looked at the neighbors. They weren't just watching anymore, they were cheering. But what happens to the HOA after Sterling's arrest, and who is the first person to offer to help Brenda rebuild the community allotment? This story of a single mom fighting corporate snobbery for her property rights and achieving financial freedom is the kind of poetic justice that drives high engagement.